Hiya, and welcome back to Sileo Tales of a New Dawn. The game that teaches us that the ultimate power move against your ex is to answer a phone call from them at 3 in the morning while having sex with someone else. That was oddly specific, but that's exactly what it teaches us. Hiya! Anyways, let's just hop right in and get ready for... Honestly, day 14 was an absolute clusterfuck. Like, y'all cannot disagree, day 14 was an absolute clusterfuck. We're on day 15 now, and I imagine it's going to get emotional. Let's just hop right in. Oh god, that's loud. $49? Have you lost your damn mind? Earlier that morning, Tide contacted Diego asking if he could start work a little earlier than usual. Incidentally, his new start time was a perfect match for when Ty and I were supposed to be meeting one another, something neither Diego nor I even remotely considered to be a coincidence. With Diego's early start and presently bare covers in consideration, we instead shared breakfast at the Café du Monde. Unfortunately for Diego, my visit the day prior had spurred on a wonderful idea. Plus, it was an idea with a considerable financial impact, and Diego was not amused. It is hardly intended for a single person to consume all alone, you know. Diego leaned forward, squinting his eyes and peering intensely, not unlike somebody's grandma to more easily make out the text on Jay's name badge. Jay. Aiden's pulling my leg, right? He's gotta be. I'm afraid not. An entire platter all alone each and every visit. It seems as though he has room left to spare. What's wrong, Diego? Afraid you're gonna lose? Me? I never lose. Fine, bring me this damn platter. I'ma beat his ass. Just you watch. As much as I hate to break it to you, it sounds as though Aiden here has beaten you to it. I walked right into that one. I couldn't resist. Well, one pastry platter coming right up. Now, Aiden, have you decided what you will be having? I had not decided, although I knew exactly what it was that I wanted. It was only a matter of whether I could resist the allure. Come on, Aiden, you're just being silly and you know it. I don't want to give him the satisfaction. Satisfaction? I do not mean to pry, but I cannot help but wonder what this is all about. Aiden is being all weird because he thinks Ty's the reason that passion fruit syrup and vanilla ice cream were added to the menu. Well, I suppose it is possible. The suggestions are anonymous, after all, so you do like passion fruit after all, Aiden. Like it? This guy's practically an addict. Back when we were in university, we ate most breakfasts at this diner close by where we lived. We both ordered that exact combo almost every single time. Yep, and I'd blow my food budget before the week was halfway done. The joys of student allowance. I don't miss that crap for a second. Don't worry, Jay, he didn't starve. I made sure of that. Well, no more than the average uni student anyway, so I guess technically we were always starved. Kept me skinny, though. Maybe I ought to start another degree. Lose this damn weight lightning quick. But yeah, Aiden here is just being stupid. Ty's a lot of things, but he ain't smug. And even if he were, it's not like I'm going to tell him what you have for breakfast. And I'll be most happy to match Diego's commitment, should that make you feel more comfortable. Makes me feel happy to hold a skewer. Something Ty had once said barged to the forefront of my mind. I couldn't let my own conflicted emotions get in the way of my very own happiness. I knew full well just how badly I wanted it. Satisfaction be damned, I was going to enjoy myself. Fine. Passion fruit and vanilla pancakes, thanks. I'm pleased to see you've made what will no doubt be the correct choice. Now, you two relax and soak in the atmosphere. Your brunch will not be far away. Thanks, dude. Yeah, thanks, Jay. Please, it is a pleasure serving such handsome gents as yourselves. With his signature courteous bow and an overly flirtatious wink, Jay flittered away, weaving elegantly between patrons and furniture to resume his former position behind the cafe counter. Okay, I immediately thought of like a ballerina. Just like... That guy is all kinds of gay. Really? You think? Smart ass. Still though, it's weird to imagine a guy like him playing in a rock band. They come in all shapes and sizes, I guess. What's weirder still is him and Eric? Seriously? What a weird pairing. In my experience, they're completely different while simultaneously being frighteningly similar. Jay's fancy and well-spoken, but beneath that veneer, he's just as bad. Sheesh, I guess the rat has finally met his match, huh? Maybe now he's getting some... Maybe now he's getting some. He might pull his jets with Lucas a little. Somehow, I doubt it. If anything, it'll probably just make him worse. Seriously? Guess I should be grateful Lucas hasn't called me in recently. A blessing in disguise. I can't begin to imagine Eric being any worse. Fucking wallet. Lost my wallet. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I lost sight of my wallet for a minute. I do not know why. Like, lost it. But, yeah. Come to think of it, neither could I. I only pray that it would not come to that. The world was ill-prepared to witness such unspeakable and unimaginable horrors. Thankfully, a shift in topic would salvage my battered mind from the depths of that terrifying logical abyss. Oh, I've been meaning to ask. You're paying for this, right? Eh? Aren't you forgetting I just quit my job? I can't afford to pay for yours, too. But this was your idea. And didn't you just treat someone to a platter yesterday? Yeah, but that was... I've got you all figured out. You'll pay when chasing tail, but won't pay when it's your best friend. I see how it is. Rude? That's bullshit and you know it. Besides, you just spent a whole week refusing my rent money. It's you who's been figured out, Diego. Only reason you're pushing for this is because this time, it's your idea. What? Well, shit. Hate to say it, but that's a damn good point. Yeah, that's right, motherfucker. I called you out. Besides, you're the one who forgot to get groceries. Pah, it's a moot point anyway. How about we settle this with a little wager instead? Aw, hell, not this shit again. No, hear me out. If I beat your new boy toy fair and square, you're paying. Okay, and what if you can't? I'll, pay for yours? Nice try, Diego, but mine only costs $11. So? That ain't my fault. Even so, that doesn't make it a fair bet. Fine, I'll pay for yours and I'll owe you a favor. A favor? What kind of favor? I don't know, a favor. Just anything you want, I guess. Anything, huh? Bad answer. I was going to have a little fun at Diego's expense. That sounds kinda lewd. What? Not like that, you ass. You said anything I want. But... you're kidding, right? Do I look like I'm kidding? I responded with the worst and most blatantly false poker face possible, an expression which was met with a palpable sense of relief. You ass, had me worried there for a bit. For that, I'm gonna make sure I finish that damn platter and take your money. Bring it on, tough guy. Just be sure you don't whinge and moan when I cash in that favor. Psh, as though it's gonna come to that. As though it's even gonna come to that. You were gonna regret doubting the limits of my iron stomach. To be fair to you, I doubted Logan as well. He sure showed me. But it's easy for you to talk big now. You haven't even seen the platter yet. I ain't scared of no platter. Bring it on. Famous last words, Diego. Famous last words. No way. How the hell? Would you like a carry-out container? No, I can finish. Diego reached his shaky hand forward, grasping another of his unfinished pastries and raising it reluctantly towards his mouth. He gingerly took a half-hearted bite. If you need to be sick, please do so in the bathrooms over yonder. Fuck. Bring it then. I'm afraid the toilets are bolted to the floor. The container, you ass. I can't. I fucking can't. Very well, back in a jiffy. Dude, how big is this Logan guy? He's gotta be the size of a damn house. Not really. You're a pretty close match, actually. Ha! Like I said, as big as a house. Never knew that was your type. Seriously, though. Yeah, that's about right. How the hell, man? I've still got like a third left. I hate to admit it, but you win this one. I can't take another damn bite. Remember, no complaints when I cash in that favor. One carry-out container as requested. Diego grumbled miserably as he began heaping pastries into the complimentary container, scattering countless flakes across the table all the while. Well then, it is like I said before, Aiden. I do so hate to pry, but there is a matter for which I possess a somewhat morbid curiosity. I simply cannot help but inquire. Let me take a wild guess. You want to know what happened after I left here yesterday, right? Indeed, all the juicy details if you'd be so kind. He didn't get home until 4 a.m. He spent the entire night worrying. My goodness, that does sound promising. But surely that entire time could not be spent solely on such filthy deeds. Now, we walked home together and, well, he called me out. So I came clean with him. Told him I was happy with friendship, fun, or both. And then I left that decision with him. I guess I felt like kind of a dick for pursuing him like that. In a way, I was trying to atone for it. I figured I'd probably blown it, so I just went home and killed time. Just when I'd completely given up, he asked me to pay him a visit, so I did. But it was his first time, so he was nervous. So we watched a movie together and just sort of got to know each other a little better. My goodness, you seriously managed to pierce that armor of his? Looks like I underestimated you, Aiden. I'm surprised myself, actually. But yeah, he warmed up to me a lot. Became a completely different person. He's actually really sweet. Honest to a fault, too. Not all grumpy and serious like he seems on the surface. I actually really enjoyed his company. How sweet. I am so pleased to hear things went well after all. Even if things didn't quite go the way you'd hoped. Oh, they did. I was about to head home after the movie, but he asked me to stay, and, well, I'm glad I did. It was fantastic. He was fantastic. We're doing it again sometime soon. Now that is the happy ending I was hoping for. Terrific work, Aiden. And in the wake of a messy breakup, there's nothing quite like a friend with benefits to keep your needs in line. With the topic at hand, I couldn't help but be reminded of Logan's request. It seemed like the perfect moment to ask. Perfect except for the fact that Diego would witness the entire thing and no doubt judge me harshly for it. He'd never let me live such a thing down. But then again, I couldn't help but think of what had transpired not so long ago. I teased Diego with a rather inappropriate suggestion, and rather than take it in good humor, he instead took it seriously. But why? Had I genuinely kept such a straight face that he believed it? Or maybe he was hoping I was serious. But no way, he's my best friend. He wouldn't, would he? What if I did ask Jake? I could extend the invitation to Diego as well. This was crazy, right? I was just being crazy again. What was I thinking? There was no way that would pan out. Hey, that reminds me, you and the rat, huh? You seem much too fancy to be hanging around with a guy like that. So I am constantly told, our friendship is mutually beneficial. We both want the same things and are in a position to help one another out with those things. We're different in a lot of ways, but the same in many others. It works well for us both. My moment had passed as the conversation continued to flow unabated. It was for the best. I'd rather act with a clear head than dive headfirst into a situation I might come to regret. And with the way my head had been lately, now just wasn't the time. But if not, then when? Would I start to feel better in due course, or would this thing only get worse and worse the longer I left it? I'd never heard of anything quite like it before, or had I? As I just got lost in my own thoughts, I experienced a fleeting moment of deja vu. Sadly, it vanished again as quickly as it first arrived, but perhaps I had indeed been wrong? Had something like this happened to other people before? I pondered myself, wondering how best I could find out for sure. Dom was certainly resourceful, perhaps he could find something? I rejected the idea, not wanting to worry any of my friends unnecessarily. Besides, I'd thought of somebody else I could ask. Perhaps it was a long shot. I didn't even know when I would get the chance, but if anybody I knew would know the answer. Aiden? You've gone all quiet all of a sudden. Sorry. It's fine, you had a late night, a busy one too. I couldn't blame you if you fell asleep. I nodded, returning my focus to the discussion at hand. I wasn't as tired as I'd expected. No doubt that would catch up with me later in the evening. You know, Jay, you got to be morbidly curious before, now it's my turn. Ooh, now I'm intrigued. Go right ahead. Well, Eric talks big, right? Like he's a big stud and all that, but a tiny little guy like him, he's gotta be all talk, right? Like, I bet he ain't such a big man when you're in charge, huh? Heh, well, I will certainly be sure to let you know. Eh, but I thought you two were... Indeed, and we are. So, you're a bottom, then? Well, no, not exactly. Truth be told, I'm quite unfazed by position. Variety is the spice of life, as they say. Alas, Eric does not share the sentiment. At least, not yet. That is still a work in progress. So, what, he refuses to bottom or something? I suppose you could say that. It gets rather testy when I press the matter, too. Huh. Is he any good? I mean, he's so tiny, he can't be, packing, right? I made the same foolish assumption, an assumption that happened to be entirely incorrect, as our mutual friend is surprisingly rather well equipped. And yes, he knows all too well how to operate such heavy machinery. I hated that I could confirm what Jay was saying firsthand. Should have never gone swimming that day. You sure those toilets are bolted down? I think we're in a bar for real this time. The mental image of his grotty dong is too much to handle. Grotty? I'll have you know that he's actually rather handsome. Stop. You better find a new topic quickly then. Yeah, oh. Aiden mentioned something about you the other day. Oh dear, talking about me behind my back, Aiden? What? No! Don't worry, he wasn't talking shit or saying anything bad. I guess it is bad, but not like that, I mean. Well, I do hope that you intend to share. Right, he said, you're Ortegan, right? Super rare one, too. What was it? Southern water? Is it water? My goodness, I'm impressed. Few people can identify a southern winter dragon by sight. A sad consequence of our numbers, I'm afraid. Perhaps such a thing being common knowledge would be more of a burden than anything. Where'd you learn about us, Aiden? Weird story, but Spencer dropped by the bar the other day. He shared a drink with me, an expensive bottle of Ortegan firewater. The real deal, if he's to be believed. He clued me in on the whole doomsday clock disorder situation. I see. And did you enjoy your firewater? Nectar of the gods, is it not? If I'm honest, I still feel a little tickle in my throat from time to time, even now. Ah, you see, that is how you know you've had the genuine article. Even if it's an acquired taste, the cheaper imitation stuff just winds up tasting like gasoline. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all that, dude. You guys got dealt a rough hand. Don't be sorry, it's not like it stopped me from being born now, did it? Besides, it has its perks. Being something of a rarity has been great for my sex life. A superpower like that, and you bag the rat? It is not as though we are exclusive, you know. Aw, shit, here comes the mental images again. Feeling of my phone vibrating from my pocket captured my attention. Retrieving it, I saw a message from Ty. It read, I am just leaving the bar now. I will be having lunch at the cafe. Please meet me there. Great. I was reminded of my impending encounter with him, something I had been trying to distract myself from for as long as possible. I suppose the time for that was well and truly over. Instead, it was time to rip off the band-aid, get it all over and done with. But wait, did he say the cafe? This cafe? Oh shit. Guys, I hate to interrupt whatever this conversation is, but we've got a small problem. So do I. The vile and distressing image of rat sausage seared in my poor innocent brain. Far from a problem in my books. Something tells me Aiden's problem may be a touch more significant. You'd be right about that. Ty just messaged me. He's on his way. Here. Now. Here? That's what he said. Seems like a dumb choice. I doubt it's going to be particularly civil conversation. Why do it somewhere so public? Quite on the contrary, I would suggest that was exactly his reason for choosing this as his venue. You would both have little choice but to mind your manners. I've been hoping for something more private, but maybe it's for the best. I can't rightly trust myself not to do or say something stupid. Did he say how far out he was? He's just left the bar. What? Oh shit, that's right, I'm late for work. Crap, I forgot about that. Sorry, Diego. Don't be sorry, that's on me. Should have been paying attention to the time. I'd better get a move on or else I'll have to explain to him why I'm here and not at work. Shit, I'd better take the long way around. Don't want to run into him along the way. Worry not, I will not speak a word of your presence. And I'd better take your plate, Aiden. Those passion fruit seeds are hard to miss. Thanks, Jay, and sorry, Diego. I hadn't expected this to be the venue. I hope you're not so stuffed you can't walk. Ain't gonna lie, that's exactly how stuffed I am. It's only a few blocks, but I might still need a taxi. Don't think I can walk like this. I'll catch you later on, okay? Of course, keep me in the loop, yeah? Let me know how it goes. Got it. You got this, okay? It's all gonna be fine, I believe in you. Diego delivered a smile of confidence as he departed the cafe to commence his short journey to Ty's bar. This left Jay standing by my table, still holding the plate which has once held my pancake breakfast. I don't think you ever said what this meeting was all about. He asked me to meet him last night, talked about a more amicable ending, closure, just, try and tidy up these loose ends of ours. I see. Well, I do hope... Oop. All of a sudden, a surprised Jay pranced away from the table, his gaze fixed in the direction of the cafe's front door. I didn't even look. I already knew who had just walked in.
Fuck you! 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 Fuck you!
I'm not mad at him at all. I'm serious, I'm not mad at him at all. Aiden? What a surprise. What? You invited me here. Indeed I did, but only mere minutes ago. Surely you must have been here already. Yeah, I couldn't handle another of Diego's greasy breakfast, so I came here for breakfast instead. Weird coincidence that this is where you chose to meet. I've taken quite a shine to this cafe, and naturally, Jay and I are acquainted as well. But on the topic of Diego, I don't suppose you have heard from him recently? He was due to start work, you see. Oh, no, not at all. You know Diego, probably running behind as always. I'm sure you're right. His time management skills are simply dreadful. Well, if it isn't Ty, lead singer of the newly reformed and greatest rock band on the planet, the Black Claws. Ha! If we are indeed the best, it is thanks to your inclusion. As much as I adore the flattery, it won't score you a discount. What'll it be? Just a coffee for me, thank you. A strong one. Aiden, would you like anything? It will be on my tab. Had Ty seriously offered to pay for my order? After everything that had happened, what? Was he trying to butter me up or something? Or perhaps he did have an ulterior motive after all? What could it possibly be? If he thought he could win me back after everything that had happened, he was sorely mistaken. Part of me still wanted that, but the right answer would always be no, regardless of what he might say. Aiden? No, thank you. Great, one strong coffee coming right up. How are you feeling? I cannot imagine you got much sleep. It was after 3 when I finally got a hold of you. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't tired. Diego was extra grizzly this morning too. I'm sure you know how he gets. Indeed, hence I usually have him working during the evenings. Looking over, I noticed the ring around Ty's neck. He'd been wearing it on the day we'd broken up. But with everything going on at the time, I'd not asked him about it. What better time than now? I've been meaning to ask, where'd that ring come from? Oh, this? Grasping the ring which hung loosely from his neck between his thumb and his forefinger, Ty took a brief moment to admire its luster before responding to my question. It has actually been in my possession for around 20 years now. It is something of a family heirloom. I lent it to a friend. Lent it? What for? Are they getting a similar one made or something? Not exactly. It is complicated, I suppose. Of course it is. Things were so far eerily civil. Almost as though there were nothing amiss between us. Of course, I knew better, and was growing impatient. Now was the time to break the ice. This ice would likely never be broken. Why did you ask me to come here, Ty? Oh, it is like I said last night. I was hoping we could reach an understanding, one without so much bad blood between us. Now let's cut the chit-chat and get on with it. It is unpleasant enough without dragging it out further. I understand. One extra strong coffee as requested. There's enough caffeine in there to keep you awake for a week. Goodness, I hope not. Thank you, Jay. Would you mind? Of course, say no more. I shall give the two of you some space. Thank you, Jay. It is my pleasure. Good luck, gentlemen. Thanks, Jay. As Jay once again departed from our table, Ty adjusted in his seat, showing an uncharacteristic nervousness. You got here quickly. I suppose you came straight from the bar? Indeed, you are as observant as ever. I'd intended to have the day off, but Russell seems to have taken a liking to a certain fighter in the combat tournament and wanted to watch his bout with Axel. I couldn't rightly refuse. I sent you the message immediately after Russell had arrived, freeing me up to leave. Which reminds me, until Diego arrives, Russell is running the show all on his own. You sure seem to trust him an awful lot given how new he is. Indeed, perhaps it was a little foolish of me, but there is something about Russell. I cannot rightly explain it, but I just know he can be trusted. He's a brisk learner, and with his array of talents, I'm sure he will handle things well. If so, I'll have plenty of time on my hands. Goodness knows I could use it. The day of the Black Claws reunion draws closer by the day, and I'm struggling to write this new song. What seems to be the issue? I suppose I have lost my muse in a sense, but I am sure that is not what you want to hear. It is a shame that with all this free time, things could not have been different. Did you ask me here to put me on your moves? Try and sweet-talk me into taking you back like last time? No, that is not why I asked you to meet with me. Then what is it? I get the general idea, but you wouldn't have called me here unless there was something specific that you want to tell me, right? Indeed. My apologies. I had hoped to dispense with the formalities and get straight to the matter at hand, but seeing your face again and hearing your voice again, it reminded me of how much I still care, that I still consider you a friend. I did not rightly know how to respond, with Ty instead enjoying a sip of his freshly made coffee to bridge the silence. He then cleared his throat and adjusted his position, clasping his hands together as his beautiful violet eyes peered directly into mine. It is hard to know where to begin. I have imagined this conversation 1,000 times over in my head, imagined every word and every outcome, but faced with reality, I am lost for words. Perhaps there's something you'd like to say, to get the ball rolling, as it were. It's unlike you to be speechless. You're usually so measured and deliberate. Indeed, this is more difficult than I could have imagined. It goes to show how much you meant to me, how much you still mean to me. But still not as much as your secrets, and before you open your mouth, I know. You were doing it for the right reasons. You wish you could tell me. The truth could get somebody hurt. You've said it all before, but it doesn't change anything. I know. Worst part is, even if I could tell you, truth is stranger than fiction. You would think it an elaborate story to conceal other motives. You simply would not believe me. And even then, it's a difficult truth to process. You never know. You might be pleasantly surprised. Perhaps earlier on I might have been, but I broke your trust. I squandered your faith. And such a tale demands both of those things. The time for that is long past, and even then, it is a secret I promised to take to my grave. I do not take that commitment lightly. Promise too. Spencer, all this is to do with him, isn't it? Aiden, you know I cannot say. I am sorry. Of course not. I don't know what I expected. But what I do know is that I know my worth, and I know that I deserve better than being kept in ignorance. I never lied about my feelings for you, Aiden, and I know. You do deserve better. You are worth more. I could not agree more, but the only thing more important than others knowing your value is knowing it yourself. Far too often do people simply remain in deeply unhappy relationships, perhaps due to financial pressures and the conveniences of cohabitation. Perhaps it is a fear of confrontation. Perhaps, despite their misery, they still genuinely love the person they are with, even more than they love themselves. Or maybe they cling on in fear of being alone. I've known several men throughout my life whose self-worth and self-esteem hinged entirely on the outward perception of their romantic success, where their misery behind closed doors was worth enduring to perpetuate that hollow illusion. What are you getting at? We had some rough patches, but I would hardly call our brief time together an unhappy relationship. You're right, nor would I. But if you had endured, remained willfully ignorant in fear of loneliness, in fear of the perception of romantic failure or anything else, I realize now that it would quickly have become one. The situation I put you in was unfair. I should never have expected you to permit such secrecy. It was so very foolish of me. I should have known better, but alas, these circumstances are unprecedented. I'd hoped to handle things better, but instead things got carried away in very short order. When faced with such an inequitable scenario, you stood up for yourself. You cast aside your feelings, your fears, and your ego, and defied unhappiness. You planted fair boundaries and enforced those boundaries when crossed without compromise. We were in deadlock, our individual boundaries, commitments, and principles, none of which were unreasonable in isolation, came into conflict in the context of a romantic relationship. And in the face of the unacceptable, you did not back down. You respected your worth and chose to be happy instead. I just want you to know that I'm proud of you, Aiden. You did the best thing possible for yourself, and sometimes that can be the hardest thing to do. I have nothing but respect for your decision, and I support it wholeheartedly. You did the right thing. What? He was proud of me? Why? I mean, I knew why, but this felt wrong. Our conversation was not supposed to be this way. These weren't the words I had hoped to hear. My heart began to pound in my chest as Ty continued. To do what you've done is a valuable skill that will serve you well in the years to come. A bright romantic future awaits those who stand tall and refuse to accept anything less than what they realistically deserve. It might be a lonely road at times, and there may be many more failed relationships just like ours, but never ever compromise on your principles. Never act out of desperation, loneliness, or fear. Continue standing strong and happiness will find you. That I can promise. You are a wonderful man, Aiden. You are going to make another lucky man very happy someday. For the short time we shared together, you certainly did so for me. I made him happy? He made me happy too. So happy. I used to grin like an idiot just thinking about him. And we shared so many good times, created so many good memories in such a short-lived romance. And no matter what happens, I will always care about you. I harbor no ill will towards you, and though you may not care for it, you will always have me in your corner. If you ever need anything, anything at all, do not hesitate to call upon me. It is the very least I can do. I suppose that covers the broad strokes of what I had wanted to say. I could sit here for hours working through my scattered thoughts, but I know you would rather get this over with, and I would hate to outstay your welcome. A single coffee hardly justifies occupying a table for very long. With that in mind, let us quickly settle our professional affairs. I understand you have resigned from the bar, and I will respect your resignation, but know that you are always welcome back at any time should you change your mind. My door will always be open to you. Of course, I understand your return will be little more than a foolish dream on my part. With that in mind, Lucas and I have spoken, and he informed you that a sizable contract might be coming up shortly. Uh... It's not really much. It's just like the side image. But you can, like, see the thing. Why is the dog wearing clothes? Could you, provide more context to that question? I'm gonna keep reading this. It is yet to be set in stone, but should it eventuate. Um... Lucas will offer you full-time hours for the duration. He will also consider the possibility of permanent hours. However, with the nature of his work, this strictly depends on business, so please bear that in mind. In the interim, I will continue paying you as usual for the next 3 weeks to help bridge the gap. Please consider a parting gift. I do not require your presence. Why? I don't need your money. The fuck? What the fuck? Because I want to, because I would hate for you to go hungry, and because I know I can never undo the pain I have caused. There is not a single thing I can do that would ease my guilty conscience, but this way, at least I've done something. I'm like actually very uncomfortable right now, so I'm just going to like hide the chat box. I'm like very uncomfortable right now. If only things could have been different. If only we had met several years ago. If only I had not made the foolish mistakes which led us to this point. I am a fool, and I reap what I sow. Such is the reality of it all. I know these words carry little weight, but for what it is worth, I'm sorry, Aiden, for everything. I didn't know what to say, what to think, how to feel. I felt numb, conflicted, entirely overcome. A part of me wanted to echo his apology with one of my own, but for reasons I struggled to comprehend. Part of me wanted to walk away in silence, part of me wanted to scream, and part of me wanted to cry. Yet, in the face of such formidable emotion, all I could do was sit there. My vision blurred as our shared silence was filled with the bustle of the cafe. With a bittersweet smile of finality, Ty rose to his feet before gazing back at me expectantly. I did not know what he wanted, nor if it were something I would want, but in the absence of such knowledge, I followed suit, finally standing half a meter in front of him as he smiled once again before holding out a striped hand. As if my body were an autopilot, I matched his gesture, grasping his hand and sharing a firm and decisive handshake. The look of sadness and guilt in his eyes was obvious, his attempts to conceal it fruitless. What could I say? What could I possibly say? Thank you for everything, Aiden. I will cherish the time we spent together. You have a bright future ahead of you, and I wish you the very best. You, too. What could I say? What should I do? Until we meet again, my dear. With that sorrowful smile, can't speak English. With that same sorrowful smile, Ty gently released his grip before turning tail with every step he took. The distance between us grew. I wanted to chase him, grab his hand, and beg him to stay. Cry as I nuzzled into his soft neck, my tears wiped away by his gentle fingers. Watching him walk away was somehow the hardest thing I had ever done. It was at that moment I realized something. I loved that man. I loved him more than words could express, and I never even had the chance to tell him. I could do little but remain frozen in place, my vision growing blurry as my eyes filled with tears. As the sliding door gave way, Ty was little more than a smeared blob of orange and blue which quickly disappeared from sight as the tears began running down my cheeks. The bustle of the cafe had given way to uncomfortable silence as every set of eyes focused squarely on my shameful display. Aiden. I loved him, Jay. I loved him, and I never even told him. It's okay. Come with me. This way. The following moments were little more than a blur, and not only because of my tear-soaked eyes. Jay had quickly come to my rescue, escorting me through the back of the premise, with begrudging approval from his boss. He then led me to his car and escorted me home. Upon arrival, I retreated directly to my bedroom where I crawled beneath the safety and warmth of my covers. By now, I had mostly regained composure but felt no motivation to be anywhere or do anything else. Jay was certainly an interesting person. Despite some questionable habits and hobbies, he well and truly had the gift of the gab in addition to a distinctive sense of warmth and empathy. We were little more than acquaintances, yet in those moments I felt genuinely cared for. Now, I'm sorry to ask you again, but are you sure you're alright? Yes, I'm fine, thank you. Now you know I don't believe that. You're going to have to be a lot more convincing before I leave you all on your own. Sounds to me like you don't have much of a choice. Your boss didn't seem thrilled when you told him what you were doing. Yeah, I'd already had time off this morning for the tournament. I can't really blame him. Oh, that's right, the quarterfinal was today, right? How'd you do? Got matched with a cute otter. Almost felt bad beating him like that. Nicely done, congratulations. But that only means you definitely can't afford to stick around. Your boss would flip. I never said that I would be staying now, did I? I happen to be acquainted with a certain rodent who I'm certain would drop everything to offer his impassioned support. Oh, hell no. I refuse to be dragged along to another strip club. You wouldn't subject me to that, would you? I wouldn't, but only if you can convince me that you're okay. I said I'm fine. I don't know what else you want me to say. Not convinced. Ugh. My irritated growl fell flat, merely eliciting a laugh from my Ortegan associate. I knew he was teasing, but the prospect of Eric's company was much too terrifying to even consider. Alright, I believe you, but it doesn't mean I won't be available should you need me. Requiring no permission, Jay collected my phone from the bedside table and held it back to back with his own to swap contact cards. Following the pling of a successful share, he returned my phone to its original position off to my side. There. If you need anything, you've now got my number. I'm working until 5 and we've got brand practice tonight, but still call or text me if you need anything at all, okay? Of course, there was no way in hell I'd be dragging him out of work or practice to dry my tears. As much as I appreciated his concern, I would not be taking him up on this offer. Nonetheless, I got the sense that arguing the point would be futile. Thus, I merely agreed. Thank you, Jay. I'll keep that in mind. I know a lie when I see one. Don't you dare be too stubborn or proud to accept my offer, or else I'll send the rat. Please, God, don't send the rat. The look on your face, Eric surely made an impression. Well then, I'll be on my way. Look after yourself, okay? Perhaps a nap is in order? You were up rather late last night. Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Pass time until Diego finishes his shift. Great, be sure to let me know how you're doing. I can bet your ass I'll be hounding you if I don't hear anything. Will do. Thanks, Jay. Anytime, Aiden. I sighed to fill the newfound silence. I felt like a total fool with everyone having seen me break down like that. I'd been incredibly fortunate that Jay had been there, that Ty had chosen that specific location, embarrassment aside. Perhaps that had been the very reason he had chosen that location? Jay certainly hadn't said anything. I doubted he was in on it, but perhaps I shook the thought from my head, unwilling to delve down the rabbit hole of conspiracy and instead focusing solely on my emotions. As it happened, Diego had been right after all. The cork had been pulled, and it hurt. It hurt more than words could describe. At some point, I'd fallen in love with Ty, and now I'd come to terms with the fact that he was gone. For the first time, it truly felt like the end. Worse yet, Ty's words had made it impossible to come crawling back. If I did, it would be the wrong time. It would be an act of putting my loneliness, my desperation, and my grief ahead of my values, my dignity, and my self-worth. Ty would know this, and Ty would refuse it. Was it possible to win him back? If so, how? What could I possibly do? What could I possibly say? As I lay there in my bed, the tears resumed, dampening my pillow as exhaustion slowly got the better of me. I missed him. I missed him so much. Is it safe to bring the chat window back? And anyone there, is it safe to bring the chat window back? Can I bring it back now? I don't know how to ban them. I don't know how to ban them. And I feel bad for it. I feel bad. And I don't know how either. I seriously thought about it, but like I said, I do not know how. Every fucking time. Torn from my slumber, I grumpily retrieved my phone from the bedside table and checked the caller ID. It was Dom. Had he learned something? Curiously, I answered the call, holding the phone to my ear. Hey. Oh, Aiden, is everything okay? Yeah, why? You sounded strange when you answered, almost like I woke you up or something. Yup. Crap, I'm sorry. It's okay, most people don't sleep at this time of day. I've just had a rough day, that's all. I see. I hope everything is okay. Do you want me to call back another time? Nah, I'll let you off the hook if you've got something good for me. Well, I know you're half kidding, but, well, Eureka. This again? No, really this time, Eureka. Alright, spit it out. What's the Eureka for this time? I know where Spencer lives. Huh? You have an address? Well, technically no, there's no address, but I know exactly where it is. What? Remember that old building that got knocked down? The one which the hot springs were a part of? Yeah? I'd all but given up on it. I thought for sure it was a dead end, but then, something compelled me to take one last look. Something? Never mind that. So I started comparing the paperwork for the demolition against other similar properties, just to see if anything stood out. As it would happen, the I's are dotted, the T's and the T's crossed. Everything looked good, on paper that was, but all the other properties showed up in future records even after the demolition. But that old building? It's as though it disappeared into thin air, not a single thing, so I pulled a bunch of satellite photos of the Woodcrest area. Wouldn't you know it, every single one had cloud cover in that exact location. Typical, right? But at closer inspection, clouds didn't look like the others. It was close, but... steam from the hot springs, maybe? It's a geothermally active area. That crossed my mind, but no. Those were nowhere near as thick or as big. A slight haze over the general area, and the occasional plume of a vent here and there. Nothing like that. To me, it looked fake. And weirder yet, the cloud was identical in every photo. Huh? What could that mean? It means somebody took a crash course in image manipulation software, created a fake cloud, and slapped it over that specific region on each and every satellite photo on record. It's the same on every public map and GPS service too. There's always a cloud there, and it's always the same one. Sloppy. So, somebody's trying to conceal something? Exactly. The building, a manor to be exact, older than Woodcrest itself, stricken from every record and legally demolished, but not physically. It's still there. How do you know if you can't see it in the photos? This is the genius part. The whole arm of the investigation? Pure accident. Axel was showing me some photos he took on the camping trip. He took a heap. There's a bunch from the return trip. Taken in just the right location, at just the right altitude, at just the right time of day. Guess what you can see in the middle of some trees in the far distance? It stands out like a sore thumb. It's encircled by thick forest and wouldn't be visible from, well, pretty much anywhere else in Woodcrest. That one specific location, like its fate. You know, now that you remind me, we stopped briefly to admire a view on the return trip. You could see all of Woodcrest from there. It was an incredible view, and Russell had to peel Axel away, but Ty, he was distracted by something. Something surrounded by a gentle haze in the northern side of town. Sorry, I saw the chat window pop up and all that, and I got scared for a second. Seriously? What else other than the hot springs are up there? Maybe he saw it himself? That's got to be what he was looking at. It could be a coincidence, but all the same, it's a very strange one. Still, I'd be willing to bet that's where Spencer lives. Sounds like the best leave we'd have so far. I don't see any entrance, though. The trees were so thick, I doubt I could squeeze through from the hot springs side. If Spencer lives there, he's got to get in and out somehow. He may be rake thin, but even he wouldn't fit through any gaps we've seen so far. So it's just a matter of finding the right spot. Ugh. I couldn't believe it. Had Dom genuinely managed to track Spencer down, or would this lead be yet another dead end? Nonetheless, all I could think about was finding the answers. Perhaps those answers would be key to turning things around? I'm gonna head there right now. Are you coming? Now? What's the hurry? I want some answers, and I'm not doing anything else anyway. I might as well, right? Sure, but it's just Eric and me, and while Lucas is having a bunch of meetings. Apparently Cutter is trying to swipe a big contract we've got coming up, and Lucas is doing everything he can to make sure that doesn't happen. Without him, we're running behind. Eric is pulling his weight amazingly, but there's no way we're finishing our work while the sun is up. Would have been perfect timing too, with Axel being out of town. Could have done so much without arousing his suspicions. He's out of town? Didn't you watch the tournament with Russell this morning? Yeah, they went to see that bear we met yesterday. He left shortly after, off to visit his parents. He does this every few weeks. Would have been perfect timing if Cutter hadn't been acting up again, as usual. Of course. Okay, okay. I'm gonna, like, go through this and, like, okay. Pretty sure it's just a matter of left clicking and there should be something on either under options and just ban. Yeah, I found that. I think it's just these four. I'm just gonna go from the first time chat thing. Honestly, I'm still a little sad that I have to ban them, but like, I feel like it might be for the best. Let me change this because I want to like do it on stream or something. I don't know why, but I feel like it. But I feel like it'll be right. So, but I still feel bad. I still feel bad, but like, I knew it had to be done. God, I feel bad. Of course, if Jay had fought around that morning, no doubt Logan would have too. Yeah, like, I'm all for, like, freedom of speech, but honestly, I was actually kind of scared throughout that. No doubt Logan would have too, but oh no, I'd kept him up so late. I hoped, prayed that I hadn't ruined things for him. Logan, right? Did Axel happen to mention how it went? Mention? He wouldn't shut up about it. Took some big Rottweiler down 3-0, apparently. The guy was a total monster. Axel thinks he was even bigger than Lucas, yet he still didn't stand a chance. I felt a sense of relief knowing that Logan had still won his fight, despite being so sweet and so kind. In the ring, Logan sounded completely terrifying. But anyway, enough about that. Come to think of it, Diego's working until late tonight too, isn't he? You're right. Would you mind if I went alone then? Alone? No, but it could be dangerous at all. There's still a lot we don't know about Spencer. I know, but strangely, he's always been very kind to me. I don't know. I guess I just don't think he's going to hurt me or anything. Even if you just walked up to his clearly very deliberately hidden house unannounced, come on, Aiden, there's a reason it's hidden. And I bet my right nut it's bad news. You're starting to sound like Diego. What happened? You were more neutral before. That was before I found out he'd faked the demolition. He's gotta have a reason for doing that. Well, I'll be sure to let you know if I find out. You're seriously going? I'm seriously going. Alright, it sounds like I can't talk you out of this. Just keep in touch, okay? Let me know how things go, and that you're safe. Will do. Wish me luck. Good luck, Aiden. Try not to die, okay? I sure will try. Later, Dom. Eureka indeed. Despite Dom's discovery being made from a number of unfounded assumptions, it somehow made perfect sense with everything we knew thus far. I was aware that it might not be the bombshell we'd hoped for, but at least it might provide some much-needed answers. And what he'd said about something having compelled him to check again, a detail Dom seemed all too ready to glaze over, as though there was something he was not telling me, combined with his hesitation towards me going alone. Maybe I was imagining things. Surely Dom wouldn't have allowed me to go if he knew I could be in danger. Nonetheless, his quick dismissal of the topic was suspicious to say the least. Suspicious enough that I found myself reevaluating my next move. Pah, who was I kidding? This was the best lead we had since, well, ever. And with how things had gone between Ty and me, this was, and just how much I had to come to regret what might have been a brash overreaction, this lead could be my only shot to turn things around. I knew not what lay ahead in the coming hours. Maybe it was fraught with danger, maybe I wouldn't learn the truth, maybe I would, but the truth was something that I wouldn't like. Regardless of the outcome, there was one thing I knew for certain. For some unknown reason, I had a good feeling about this. Dom had been right on the money. Having spent nearly half an hour looking for anything that might betray hidden entrance, I had almost lost hope when the sight of slightly trodden grass and a small branch bent at an unnatural angle led to a well-disguised, narrow and overgrown pathway. Having followed that pathway to its eventual outlet, I came face to face with exactly what I had been searching for. An ancient manor, tucked deep within Woodcrest's northern forest. A manor which should not have existed. A manor we believed to be the residence of one particularly elusive raven. When I departed Diego's house, I was fired up, determined to find the answers to those unanswered questions and potentially even correct my trajectory with Ty. That was, of course, assuming such a thing were possible, that it wasn't already too late. Alas, the journey had taken considerable time which permitted my mind to wander and reflect on my scenario and other recent happenings, and I had come to several conclusions, some of which were rather uncomfortable. No matter what Ty's secrets were, there were things he could have said and done to avoid this outcome. Perhaps he meant well, but if so, that made him an idiot, and if not, well, but I knew that I had behaved in a way that was unbecoming of me as well. Reflecting on what had happened that night, I had a mere sliver of information, a tiny piece of a larger conversation, and without any further context, I went nuclear. I knew I'd been acting strangely even before that, but I still had no idea as to why, or even if that behavior had been to blame for that blatant overreaction. Regardless, I knew my frustration towards my constant involuntary ignorance was very real indeed. And now, here I stood, a short distance from what we anticipated to be Spencer's residence, driven here by the very forces which might have spurred the actions responsible for ending my fledgling relationship. Ty had applauded the fact that I'd stood up for myself and held a firm line, but to me, my newfound determination was more of a curse, and in a moment of clarity as I stood in this very spot, I wondered if being here would become just another of my many mistakes to add to the pile. Perhaps Spencer was dangerous after all, perhaps in being here I was foolishly risking my life. He wouldn't have gone through all this effort to maintain his veil of secrecy without good reason. Alas, I knew it was foolish, but there in that very moment, I could not see any other way forward. My heart bled profusely, my emotional wounds causing such distress that stemming the flow had become my only priority. And learning the truth, that was my light at the end of the tunnel. Somewhere deep down, I knew it was almost certainly in vain. That what was done could never be undone. But in my desperation, I was willing to take that chance. In my suffering, I was fully prepared to die trying. Whether that soothing light be the radiant glow of a happy future by Ty's side, or just a freight train coming my way. I knew that with time my pain would fade, and with it so would my propensity to take such crazy risks. But that would be then, and this was now, and in the now I could do whatever I had to. Whatever unlikely shot there was at easing my pain, at changing my fate, even if those efforts were almost certainly in vain. At long last, I approached what appeared to be the front door of the manor. Though there were many points of entry strewn about the vast perimeter of the building that knowing on which to knock seemed borderline impossible, the large wooden door towering above me set an antiquated brickwork and well endowed with elaborate metal trim seemed as good a bed as any. I rapped my knuckles on the distinctly ornate door as my anxious heart began to make its presence known. It invoked a bizarre sense of deja vu as memories of the night before come flooding back. At least this time I wasn't planning to sleep with the occupant. I chuckled to myself, my vile sense of humor knowing what little restraint as I raised my knuckle once again. My knuckles throbbed somewhat, their recurrent impact with the solid wood causing mild discomfort. Yet not unlike the first attempt, the subsequent knocking garnered no response. Thus I began to circle the manor, inspecting each and every door while peering through every window. It wasn't long before I came to an obvious realization. The weather outside was dire, the relentless rain accompanied by the frequent and blinding flashes of lightning and their subsequent thunderous booms following closely behind. Within the manor I hadn't spotted a single light, with every room concealed by a blanket of darkness. I knew that ravens weren't typically a nocturnal species, thus lacking the ability to see well in dark environments. It was just my luck. I'd come all this way, facing the torrential downpour on my journey to the manor, only to find its resident unaccounted for. I sighed. It was just my luck, but a small setback such as that would not be enough to defeat me. Instead, I scanned my surroundings for shelter, eventually locating a large tree situated on the western side of the property. If I sat behind it, I would be both sheltering myself from the harsh conditions while concealing myself from view. It was perfect. I smiled to myself, thankful for the shift in my fortune as I approached the tree, positioning myself to its rear and easing down upon the damp grass that wrapped around the circumference of its trunk. I didn't rightly know how long I would be waiting, but I got comfortable in preparation for the worst-case scenario. I retrieved my phone, wiping the damp screen with a similar damp sleeve, a futile act which achieved little. With a mostly unbothered shrug, I began to surf social media and check out the latest entertainment news. Boy, was I glad that I forked out extra for a water-resistant handset. He's keeping up with the Kardashians. I knew not how much time had passed, an hour perhaps, maybe two. As yet there has been no sign of censor, although I hoped that I had not merely missed him during one of my many moments where I caught myself nodding off. Despite my shelter, the harsh and unpredictable winds had shaken the leaves and branches above, drenching me time and time again. In addition, I frequently fell victim to spray that had missed my leafy canopy entirely. Perhaps even worse yet, it was an uncomfortable, chilly mid-autumn day with no sun to warm my surroundings. I shivered again and again with no way to warm myself. Each time my mind suggested returning home, I violently put the idea to rest. Nothing would stop me. I don't care if I got sick or worse, nothing would stop me. Nonetheless, I needed to warm myself up somehow. Thus, I returned my phone to my pocket and climbed to my feet, deciding to once again walk the perimeter of Spencer's residence. Perhaps I'd missed something like last time? A wonky justification, but in truth, I didn't really need one to begin with. As I walked, I once again made a point to peer inside every window and check each door, largely uneventful process that returned nothing unexpected. That was until I gave a smaller wooden door on the building's northern face a gentle push. It was strange because I knew that I'd tried that door the last time I patrolled the manor. Had Spencer arrived home without me noticing? Was there another entrance to the grounds? Or perhaps he'd seen me coming and slipped away while I'd not been looking. The specifics didn't really matter. What mattered is that I now had a means to gain entry. Perhaps I would not be able to ask Spencer directly, but perhaps I'd find the answers I was looking for within his residence itself instead. I hoped and prayed that he would not catch me rummaging through his personal effects, and if he did, I desperately hoped that he would take pity on this cold, wet husky. I took a deep breath before stepping across the threshold, my crime of trespassing suddenly escalating to a whole new level. Closing the door behind me, I held my position for several moments, waiting for my eyes to adjust to the darkness. Besides the sound of torrential downpour outside and the occasional boom of furious thunder, the interior of the manor was suspended in deathly silence. Gradually more and more detail in my environment came into view as my eyes continued to adjust, and very quickly a major detail regarding my surroundings became all too clear. It's abandoned? I ventured inward, dutifully closing the door behind me as the oppressive darkness entombed me in its suffocating void. In fear of a visibility-related injury, I stood in place waiting patiently as my eyes slowly adjusted to the manor's dim interior. It began with large silhouettes, eventually progressing into smaller and more intricate details. It quickly became evidence that somebody certainly lived here, even if that person wasn't necessarily who we thought it was. Opposite of the entry, I saw two chairs deliberately positioned a short distance from an unlit fireplace. Surrounding the fireplace, lining each and every vertical surface of the room spare for a dark passageway in the opposite corner, were a series of towering wooden bookcases. Each and every bookcase was full to the brim with all manner of material. A mess of paperbacks mixed in with hard covers. Some books even had no covers whatsoever, while others sat atop the others, perched horizontally in the remaining vertical space of their specific shelf. It was an impressive collection, although in such a dimly lit scenario, I couldn't make out just what kind of books they were. Despite that, I could see that some were very, very large and some very, very old indeed. For a moment, I considered lighting the fire to dry myself off before coming to my senses. Surely there would have been no better way to blow my cover, although the constant dripping of water from my drenched attire wasn't much better. I only hoped they would, Looking downward revealed a bizarre phenomenon. Looking like a drowned dog only moments ago, both my fur and my clothing were now bone dry. Stranger yet, I hadn't noticed until now. What manner of... Oh, hell no! Before me, the emergence of bizarre and almost otherworldly light caught my focus, the glow of an almost lime green which emitted from the right-hand chair, drawing my attention to an object which sat upon its distinctly worn cushion. It was strange and very difficult to put into words, but that strange green glow, it had something of a soothing effect which contrasted my own feelings. bringing the sheer gravity of my situation into focus. I shouldn't be here. This was a bad idea. I should go. I panicked slightly. The foolishness of this endeavor clearer than it had ever been. Why had I come here? It had been such a stupid move. One I hadn't even questioned, instead merely giving in to my pain and desperation. I'm gonna get a drink of Yum Yum water real quick. Strangely, there was then some kind of shift in the object's flow. It was almost as if the object had responded to how I'd been feeling, adjusting its approach to compensate. I felt reassured. It was nothing short of bizarre, almost as if the object was telling me not to be afraid, telling me that I would come to no harm. A trap, surely, to lull me into a false sense of security? No, not a trap. I was welcome here? I didn't understand. I approached the object, its glow fading as I reached out to pick it up. It was a photo frame of some sort that had been set face down on a chair. Curiously, I flipped it over. Huh. It was a photograph taken of what looked like an ornate oil painting, reminiscent of the works produced by famed historic artists. The painting depicted two individuals, the first of which was a familiar-looking raven. Both the raven and his companion wore distinctly antiquated attire, reminiscent of something from an old-timey tale. Despite being a painting, something about those objects struck me in a rather intriguing way. Specifically, outfits like this usually looked cheap, like the costumes they always were. At least, always until now. Even through the artist's lens, it was clear that these outfits were no mere imitation. A quality movie props, perhaps? I had known Spencer to be the theatric sort, although the same could not be said for his companion, a parrot whose brilliant green plumage rendered his darker companion dull and lifeless by contrast, his handsome face adorned with a bright and seemingly genuine smile. If he were an actor, his looks alone would have made him a household name, which is precisely why I knew that this was no act. His smile was real, and so was his outfit, and the implications of that were difficult to process. I see you have met Artemis. I turned in place, the photo frame still clutched carefully in my hand. Whether it was Spencer's silvery tone or some effect of the painting I did not know, but I wasn't afraid. After all, I had no reason to be, right? I do apologize for my arrival started you. I'd intended to greet you sooner, but encountered some difficulties with my arrival. It has been a long time since I've done this, you see. What do you mean by this, exactly? Forgive me. I've barely spoken 2 words, and yet I am already getting ahead of myself. Despite appearances, I would have you know that I am quite the chatterbox. Thus, when the rare opportunity to speak with somebody unabated presents itself, I am all too inclined to make the most of it. Though I kindly ask your patience. There is a lot for us to cover, and many of your questions will be addressed in due course. Thankfully, time has no meaning in this place. We are free to take as long as we wish without consequence. What do you mean by this place? Well, in any normal environment, your clothing and fur would not magically dry itself now, would it? And correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe this is not your first visit. On my first visit? What do you... I could very much be mistaken, and if so, please accept my apologies. But the first day we met, you saw me in a dream, did you not? A dream? More like a terrifying nightmare. How did you know about that? Experience, you could say. Okay, I got the skewer. I'm poking him. Though I did not know this at the time, certain concerns brought this possibility to my attention. Apologies. I know I appear to be speaking in riddles. It is as I said, there is much for us to cover. All will become clear in time. But why? Isn't this supposed to be some big secret? Indeed, but I simply cannot live with the pain my secret has caused. For you, for Ty. I have already broken Ty's heart once. I refuse to be responsible for it a second time. So you two were a thing. Then who is this Artemis? The best friend I ever had. My constant companion. My soulmate. I am certain he would have liked you. It would seem that he agrees. Huh? Spencer chuckled warmly, amused by Artemis's reaction. I didn't understand. Artie begged his eternal rest some hundreds of years past, in a time that predated photography, as I am certain you have already surmised. As for Ty and me, well, it was considerably more recent. although similarly a fragment of the past, as difficult as that can be to admit sometimes. It is a long story, and there is much you must come to understand for the truth that you seek to make sense. I should warn you in advance, you will learn things about the nature of your being of which you might find ignorance preferable. But I know well enough that will not stop you, and in truth we both strive for the very same thing. Thus, it would behoove you to accompany me on this journey. We are presented with a very rare and golden opportunity. Instead of merely telling you the things you must know, I can show you. You say that as though our encounter is unexpected. Well, somewhat yes. I had anticipated your visit, but I had not anticipated your slumber. And now we both share the stream. I fell asleep? It would seem so. I do hope you are not getting wet. Now, your questions will be answered in due course. But as for here and now, is there anything specific you have yet to comprehend? Yeah. Why do you have a photograph of a painting? My, so many things you could have asked, and instead you... critique my decorative choices. But humor aside, I have very little to remember Artie by. That painting is the only thing I have left beyond my own memories. I keep the original sealed away somewhere safe. Spencer had mentioned that the painting depicted a time before photography. If it was indeed him in the painting, then... I reached into my pocket and retrieved my phone, now similarly bone-dry just like my clothing. Scrolled through my messages to find what I was looking for. A sepia-toned photograph came into view. Showed this to Spencer in support of my next question. What about this? Are you Sebastian Duvamon too? Spencer's bright smile lit up the room. His heartfelt delight unmistakably genuine. So it is you! Indeed, I forgot how handsome Edwin was when he was young. I could never resist Mason's smile. I miss those gentlemen dearly. What happened? Same as ever. Time did as it won't do. Time did as it won't do. Nobody lives forever. Even you? Even me, although it may not seem that way. Though it is true that I am unusually long-lived. That photograph is nearly 100 years old now. Both Edwin and Mason have been gone for about half as long. 50 years. It was around then that this manor was supposedly demolished, right? Signed for one by Solomon Moreau. Indeed, I had retired as Sebastian years prior. At that time, Mason had already left us, and Edwin's once golden maid had since turned pure white. My own relatively unchanged appearance had made it far too difficult to explain why. Many of my responsibilities as a founding mayor were handed to local government. But some were passed down to Solomon, fulfilling those obligations through trusted proxies and keeping a low profile. Eventually, Solomon would retire in much the same way, and thus Spencer would take on the role. I knew it. Spencer's a pseudonym too. Then what is your real name? A question I have been asked many times, yet one I still struggle to answer. I suppose it all comes down to what you believe makes a name real. What about the name your parents gave you? I'm afraid I had no parents to speak of. If it is not already evident, I am unlike you or Ty or anybody else. Unlike Artemis? No, Artemis and I were alike. Then where did his name come from? He chose it. In his studies of culture and mythology, he studied ancient religions and their deities. He took a liking to the name Artemis. Always said it rolled off the tongue far more nicely than 6. 6? His name was a number? Indeed, the same goes for all of us. I was 9, and no, I did not choose a name, but Artemis chose one for me. A name that stuck with me, whether I liked it or not. A name which I was known by for many long years. I suppose a reintroduction is in order. Hello, Aiden. My name is Apollo. I am pleased to make your acquaintance. Hold on.
I'm going to have to put on my fucking double-seeing glasses because I can't even begin to see the amount of bullshit coming from you.
I'm so confused. Spencer delivered his introduction with a gracious and cordial bow. I responded with a smile matched entirely by his already bright expression. Now then, my dear friend, shall I make a start? There's so very much left to cover. I still had questions, many questions in fact, but I trusted that Apollo would answer them all in time. Alright, where to first? Apollo beckoned towards the door in the corner of the room, opposite from where I'd entered. In the context of what I'd learned since, it was now obvious that this was no ordinary door at all. The almost solid black expanse beyond wasn't merely darkness, it was a rift. Walking through the store would take me somewhere of Apollo's choosing. Was this really such a good idea? I held the frame up once more, admiring Artemis's brilliant plumage as its distinctive ring glow began to illuminate the room once more, gifting me courage and reassurance. I felt compelled to bring Artemis with me on this journey for reasons I could neither explain nor comprehend. It was almost as though he wanted to come along, a request I wholeheartedly obliged. I approached the doorway as Apollo remained in place, his warm smile unwavering as he patiently waited for me to proceed. Up close, the darkness beyond the door had substance and weight. Admittedly, I was a little terrified of stepping through it. Thankfully, I would not be doing so alone, and I was determined that nothing would stand in my way. I would learn the truth, and at this point, I didn't much care if I died trying. What the fuck? What the fuck? Were it only so simple to tell you the truth. Alas, experience denotes that a comprehensive explanation is in order. Truth is oft stranger than fiction, and words lacking appropriate context are little more than just words. Our tale begins with the conclusion of another, the terminal death rattle of our forebears, a species of whom our very existence was predicated. Death gives way to new life, as is the perpetual cycle of mortality. Theirs is often presented as a fable of sorts, a cautionary tale warning of the follies of the short-sighted, the stubborn, and the greedy. It is a tale taught from a young age in each and every classroom the world over. I, of course, refer to the ill-fated tenure of the once mighty human race. In a sense, we are fortunate that their failures have become our lessons, informing our trajectory as a species in hope that we may yet avoid repeating their mistakes. Sadly, it would seem as though we have far more in common with our forebears than perhaps we would like to admit. Perhaps in such an outcome is preordained. Perhaps we are doomed to fail again and again. Another bitter cycle kept recurrent so long as we were given the opportunity to try. The beginning of their end was marked by the emergence of a war spanning all four corners of the globe. A war whose gravity was so immense that there were no bystanders. Those without allegiance would swiftly be erased, their lands serving as little more than open positions in their murderous game of military chess. It was a conflict founded on a difference of ideologies, fueled by assertions that their way of life was the ultimate gospel. Naturally, a claim mirrored on all sides, sharing a sense of veracity in common, or better said, a lack thereof. Long before the war began, each nation had succeeded in cultivating a culture where pride in one's nation and passion for supremacy was not only commonplace, but considered a core component in being an upstanding citizen. Those who dared question the status quo expressed doubt in the integrity of their nation, or even go so far as suggesting that their lives were not quite as good as they were expected to believe. These people were shunned, reviled, and treated with disgust. Of course, these individuals were simply indoctrinated, something those same individuals would feverishly and aggressively refute, so deeply entangled in their blind ignorance that any differing perspective was both unfathomable and irrefutably wrong. Both sides fought beneath their flags, proud of their nations and confident in their righteousness. But is spilling the blood of one's sworn enemy in the name of your nation truly so righteous? Murdering one's fellow man in the name of some fickle allegiance, does it all sound so righteous? So long as the masses were willing to take up arms, righteousness was akin to little more than the strings of a marionette, puppeteered by those with no concern for such trivialities. In truth, those pulling the strings did so of self-interest, born from a desire to extend their reach and bolster their power. Year after year, they sent the young, the foolish, and the patriotic into the meat grinder, facing certain death while their puppet masters remained safe behind their fortified walls, their pockets growing ever deeper, so too their influence as their hands grew blackened by endless blood. So is the bureaucracy of the selfish and the indifferent. Little more than a twisted visage of feudalism, predicated on the misguided belief that their nation and their way of life was absolute, the one true force of good in an otherwise twisted and evil world. And so the war waged on, a war whose death toll soon numbered in the billions, a feat achieved in a mere 2 decades of conflict. Of course, this presented something of a dilemma to those in power. You cannot fight a war without soldiers, thus both sides sought a solution. Peace was never even a consideration, not with so much left for those in power yet to gain. Instead, each side pursued alternative means to shore up their numbers and ensure the perpetuity of their conflict. One side, a nation renowned for its technological prowess, constructing legions of automata, unthinking, unfeeling machines with their unmatched efficiency and a ruthless, single-minded determination for executing their enemy. The opposition, a nation whose aptitude for the genetic sciences was second to none, instead cloned the most decorated and successful of their existing forces en masse, using DNA samples mandatorily collected at the time of conscription. Unfortunately for them, this nation, whom for brevity's sake I will refer to as Koalathan, quickly found themselves in a rather substantial disadvantage. While their cloned units could be produced cheaply and en masse, they were no match for the catastrophic lethality of their enemy's automata. A lone machine capable of making quick work of multiple large hostile units entirely unassisted. The coalition had the advantage in their numbers, but it became abundantly clear that the sheer disparity in combat efficiency would promptly become their undoing. They knew that fighting fire with fire would be a lost cause, their own technology incapable of matching that of the enemy, and thus in desperation they doubled down on the only hope they had left, their genetics program. Time was an ill-fated luxury as the balance of the war began to shift dangerously, prompting the coalition to assemble an elite team of geneticists comprising many of the brightest minds of their time. Their initial plan had been to fully reverse-engineer the human genome, a process which had once been thought borderline impossible, more recently made feasible by major discoveries in the field. Alas, even then it would take time, more time than they had to spare. Without the complete sequence, simulating their modifications became difficult and unreliable. Trial and error became a major component of their research, a gruesome and wasteful process where experimental modifications would be tested on live cloned specimen. More often than not, this process produced monstrosities, abominations that were disposed of all too quickly, but occasionally breakthroughs were made, breakthroughs that offered a faint glimmer of hope that the war might not yet be lost. Several years had passed with countless catastrophic losses, pushing the coalition to the brink of defeat as the last of their forces retreated to the mainland to stage their final defense, when at long last the first batch of enhanced soldiers were deployed in their defense. The splicing of human DNA with that of wild animals was the brainchild of a young and brilliant geneticist named Dr. Marsden. His attempt to integrate their forces with desirable traits sourced from the animal kingdom, and despite many hurdles along the way, his project was an overwhelming success. The resulting soldiers were faster, stronger, and more lethal than ordinary human units with zero impact on their cost, and it was these prototype soldiers who were credited with the successful defense of their homeland. Dr. Marsden would quickly become the coalition's head of genetic science, and his team would go on to produce an array of specialized soldiers whose traits were carefully tailored for specific operations which pushed their enemy further still, restoring balance to the ongoing war. But as the coalition's confidence in Marsden's program grew, so too did the extravagance of their demands. They wanted faster units, stronger units, smarter units. They wanted things that could cause significant discomfort among their troops, things that would rob them of their free will. In particular, one of these significant requests was for a system designed to rival the communication abilities of the enemy automata. Every unit on the field formed a network enabling near-instantaneous transmission of a highly complex information. Every unit on the field transmitted comprehensive combat data, from their damage status to their ammunition count, and even target recognition data. All it took was a single unit to spot an enemy, and the whole unit would instantly engage in perfect tandem. Coalition attempts to crack the encryption medium used had been entirely in vain, and attempts to interfere with or scramble the network had not fared much better. And so the Coalition deferred to Marsden, demanding a system that would override an individual's will, rendering them entirely at the mercy of their orders. And for the first time, Marsden refused. He was tired of playing God, and stripping his subjects of their autonomy was a line he would not cross. No matter what, the Coalition responded by demoting him to an advisory position, making him a figurehead, for all intents and purposes. The project would soon proceed unabated, using Marsden's research to develop a pheromone-based system capable of replicating a great deal of the required functionality within the limitations of what was possible in a biological imitation of a digital creation. The system utilized purpose-built command units who produced two separate pheromones, known colloquially as Control and Command. These commanders would be accompanied by newly upgraded drone units who were susceptible to those chemical signatures. Exposure to the control pheromone will strip the drone of their inhibition and suppress their free will, rendering them obedient and all too willing to sacrifice themselves to see their orders fulfilled. The second of these pheromones, command, essentially worked as a rudimentary communication medium. Commanders could issue commands and other important information in almost real time, practically negating the need for traditional means of communication. In addition, exposure to the former of these two chemicals prompted replication of the very same pheromones in a drone, allowing groups of drones to form a network over greater distances and to redistribute commands, reaching units who otherwise may have been out of the commander's reach. It was an intricate and surprisingly effective system that once again corrected the tipping balance of the conflict. But to the now maturing Marston, the coalition had crossed a line that he simply could not accept. As time marched on, the more things changed. The more they only seemed to stay the same. Alas, there were constants from which Marston could only derive little comfort, as many more iniquitous implementations had only further twisted Marston's greatest triumphs into more and more unrecognizable abominations. I know this is going to sound awful, but I want to go back to Diego's route. Ignorance is bliss. It had long become clear that neither side would accept anything less than an unconditional victory, yet neither side would tolerate defeat, and with both nations in possession of sizable nuclear arsenals, armed and ready to fire at any time, Marston knew exactly how things would end. Not in victory nor in defeat, but in fire. A nation on the brink of defeat launching a colossal payload of devastating nuclear weaponry, promptly repaid in full through mutually assured detonations. Marston was certain of this outcome. There was no future for his species except for total annihilation by their own hand, but Marston would not stand idly by allowing this to spell the end of intelligent life on Earth. Instead, he resolved to atone for his many sins, enacting a contingency plan for when all else was lost. Over the years, Marston had utilized what little authority he had left to pilfer resources, materials, and research from his employers without their knowledge. He worked slowly and carefully, taking great care not to arouse suspicion as he worked to assemble a lab of his own, until one small slip threatened the success of his plan. Forced into action, he defected in the dead of night, tucking himself away within his bunker where his employers could not find him. His premature departure had robbed him of much of what he needed, but he nonetheless had enough to begin his work, and his goal? To give his creations, his children, the opportunity humanity had stolen from them. He would strip them of mankind's perverse alterations and restore them to a more natural state, granting them the existence of free will, happiness, and prosperity they were so cruelly denied. Marston had been correct. Only a few short years after his self-exile, the outside world was cleansed in almighty hellfire. At long last, the war had come to an end. Contrary to his prediction, however, humanity proved more resilient than anticipated. Some yet survived, isolated in small pockets of inhabitable land between insurmountable barriers of lethal radiation. But humans had long lost the skills needed to survive in the wild, their dependence on the conveniences of developed civilizations rendering them helpless victims to a cruel world that had been stripped bare of the resources needed to sustain them. What began in cooperation ended in conflict, as is the eternal cycle humanity once wrought. Some fell prey to the radiation, others to attrition, and the rest to one another. I wonder what crossed the last surviving human's mind as he took his final breath. Did he know he was the last of his kind? Did he believe that the legacy of man would die along with him? Marston spent decade after decade working tirelessly towards his goal. In his eyes, he had sinned. He had twisted life and perverted nature to better serve the interests of cruel and evil men who no longer drew breath. He could not forgive himself for the part he had played in their schemes. He could never forgive himself for giving so many the gift of life so that they might throw it away in the name of a nation they never knew, for a cause they never believed, for a promise of peace they would never know. And thus he dedicated every last second he had left to his work, so that he may bequeath this earth to what he considered a more deserving heir, and that someday he might yet learn to forgive himself. His early departure had robbed him of the research required to dismantle many of the more complex alterations, forcing Marston to resort to trial and error once more. Many a tear shed for each and every failed experiment, for each and every time he had to say goodbye. The years would take their toll, and as Marston's frailty progressed, so too did his fear that his body would fail him before his work was complete. There was nothing more important than his work, nothing he would not do to see it through, even if his only shot at atonement required that he repeat the very mistakes that led him down this path to begin with. And so he began work on an experimental line of clones, this time combining his existing work with the genetic code belonging to the Coalition's command units, whose unique adaptations provided a more suitable platform for the specific intent of this new research. Born from this project came 12 highly experimental prototypes, each comparable in a great many ways but nonetheless bearing their own unique solution to the very same problem. While the work Marston had already completed allowed him a substantial head start, much hard work was still required to unravel the complex systems built into the Commander's DNA systems that, left to their own devices, threatened the success of Marston's plan. Already on borrowed time, Marston maintained a delicate balance between the quality of his work and the pace with which it progressed, and after several more years, the first of these creations drew its first breath. Their purpose? To pilot cutting-edge genetic research that would not only combat the effects of aging, but practically cease the onward march of time entirely. For all intents and purposes, these new prototypes were designed to be immortal. Alas, Marston would quickly learn that despite the implied yet rudimentary success of his research, the immortality of his subjects possessed came with an array of untold side effects, and even then, replicating the effect on an existing being had proven impossible. Marston's only success was a means to delay the inevitable, to evade the cold grasp of decay for long enough. He hoped to see his purpose fulfilled, and so he continued his work, and for the first time in several decades, he would not be doing so alone. His immortal companions were given new meaning. Their original purpose already served. Thus, it would become their duty to consume the vast archives of human knowledge that Marston had archived before joining their more transient siblings in cryostasis. And once they awoke, it would become their duty to act as shepherds and oracles to the new inhabitants of Earth, imbuing them with secrets of human knowledge and teaching them the follies of their predecessors' demise. Each immortal had a range of subjects assigned to them, spending year after year expanding their knowledge, all the while supporting Marston in his research as he fought against the inevitable, his body slowly wasting away. Hold on, let me check something in the files. Okay, so it'd be under illustrations, ties route, Genesis, fuck, we still have a long way to go. Nobody lives forever, but despite being the very last of his species, Marston did not die alone. In fact, he did so surrounded by those who considered him a father, by those he considered his children, those who put his concerns to rest, assuring him that he had finished his work in time. I know it crossed the last surviving human's mind as he took his final breath. He knew that he was the last of his kind, but he also knew that because of his tireless efforts, the legacy of man would yet live on, giving rise to the very species they had demanded died for them. Marston left this plane with a rare and well-deserved smile, that of a man who at long last had found his redemption. After all, his work had been completed, had it not? I was the one who uttered that lie, and I've no regrets. In truth, there was still work yet to be done. One by one, the immortals began their lengthy slumber, waiting for the day the outside world would once again become inhabitable. All that was, except for one. The geneticist among the mortals took up Marston's mantle, sharing in his creator's desire to see the project come to fruition. Alas, as talented and well-learned as he was, his own knowledge paled in comparison to Marston's. something that in time would come with a great many unexpected consequences. It was 6,000 years before the automated systems in the laboratory would initiate the thaw, starting first with the immortals and followed by hundreds upon hundreds of weird and wonderful species, all similarly confused and afraid of an unknown and foreign world. A head count of the immortals was promptly revealed a discrepancy. Number 4, the geneticist, had never made it to cryostasis. Instead, he remained awake to watch over his brothers and sisters, to act as a warden, safeguarding Marston's legacy. System logs revealed that were not for his manual intervention and several seemingly proprietary upgrades to the lab systems, none of them would have woken. He had saved every one of their lives more than once, every one spare his own. Little remained other than dust, having passed long, long ago. Our continued survival was a testament to his work, but his demise was shrouded in mystery. Perhaps we were not so immortal after all? I imagine so. I'm so confused right now. Emerging into the unfamiliar world, Earth's inheritors experienced harsh and icy mountains, but instead emerged into a lush and idyllic valley whose unnatural geography made its devastating origin abundantly clear, with successful millennia decorating the once barren landscape with picturesque trees and crystal clear lakes. From this location, the immortals divided their populations and spread across the four corners of the earth, forming fledgling civilizations and taking full advantage of the second chance Marston's works had afforded them. Of course, it would not be long before a series of dire flaws in the genetics in both the immortals and their charges became painfully evident. In particular, the system responsible for generating pheromones, a system which Marston had attempted to dismantle, was still very much operational. Yeah, very much. This would not have been a problem, as the drones had been reworked to not be receptive to the pheromones in the first place, yet, on occasion, the odd individual would exhibit the telltale signs of exposure. Worse yet, while the control aspect still functioned exactly as intended, the command component did not. Instead, an immortal's consciousness was streamed via these pheromones, often including thoughts, memories, and emotions. Of those receptive to those pheromones, none of them could consciously perceive this information. Both in their subconscious, they all saw it, and for those in states with the predisposition towards delusion, this information could seep in, causing untold effects within the victim's mind. Yo! Is the MC one of the immortals? This occurred frequently to those with mental illnesses such as schizophrenia, but for those receptive, the effects could easily be recognized in a far more common state. Can you guess which? Indeed, the state of slumber, as you know all too well from first-hand experience. As it would happen, an immortal's ability to not only control but even perceive the information their pheromones would propagate had been rendered practically non-existent, though in a strange twist, the reins were handed back during their own states of slumber. Not particularly useful in and of itself, but in the presence of one receptive and their chemical signatures while both parties were asleep. A well-practiced and adept immortal could bend their perception, the dreamscape, their canvas, and their will the brush. Alas, the exposure to these pheromones would achieve the intended impact of making the subject more obedient, stripping them of their inhibitions. But without an immortal to pilot them, they instead fell victim to their own base instincts, their primal whims, their carnal urges. Immortals were best to ration their presence, maintaining sufficient distance as to avoid the possibility of exposing an individual. And some of us did, overseeing our respective kingdoms and enacting our will via trusted proxies. But some had other plans. It did not take long at all for our group to fracture into opposing factions, disagreeing over the trajectory that our civilizations would take, of our roles in these civilizations, and even disagreeing over Marston himself. For some, he was like a father. For others, he was little more than a meddling traitor. And yeah, that sounds about right. Honestly, I'm confused. While Marston was still alive, I had become close with another certain immortal who was designated the number of 6. We got along well, our mismatching personalities proving the sentiment that opposites attract, as our strengths covered the other's weaknesses and vice versa, forming a stronger, unified whole. His primary fields of study were chemistry, botany, and herbology. However, he took an interest in the topics of human religion and mythology and studied these as a hobby. In particular, he was fond of what was known as Greek mythology, from which he adopted the name Artemis. And despite my many complaints, I was gifted the name Apollo. Though reluctant at first, against all odds, the name stuck. It was the name my followers would come to know me by over the course of several thousand years. Sadly, when our groups divided, Artemis and I found ourselves on opposing sides of the conflict. I stood up for what I believed in, where Artemis's allegiance followed the path of the least bloodshed. He tried to protect his people by befriending those who would most threaten their well-being. I consider myself a servant of my people, a benevolent source of knowledge and wisdom. I also fancy myself something of a higher power, my own inherent lack of greed, bias, and selfish desire forging a path untainted by human flaws. I meant well, but I was foolish. I began to trust my own counsel more than anybody else's. I became dismissive of others' opinions, dismissive of their thoughts and their feelings, and most crucially, dismissive of their warnings. I had been warned of a large army mobilizing in the forests of the southeast of our kingdom, an army belonging to one of my fellow immortals, the very same Artemis had pledged his allegiance to, who had positioned himself as a deity among his people, demanding worship and sacrifice. An immortal who had trained his populace to treat those with exposure symptoms akin to how humans once treated witches. Public executions were common, fueled by faux paranoia, deliberately spread to keep the public in fear, and obedient to their god, their one chance at salvation. It was all too familiar a story. Recalling the hubris which had led to our forebears' demise, I believed us worthy successors. I believed that we were somehow better than that. I overanalyzed our circumstances, creating rationale where there was none, and applying reasons to actions born from reckless overconfidence and a total lack of value for life. I had convinced myself that he had no reason to attack, nothing to gain by doing so. I had convinced myself his armies had mobilized for other reasons. I had convinced myself and those who looked to me for guidance that no harm would come to us. I was such a fool. They attacked in the dead of night, massacred our armies as they slept, butchered the women and children, laid siege to my kingdom's walls, and burned it all to the ground. Artemis and I had once jokingly given Seven the name Hades, a deliberate prod at his dour and oftentimes standoffish demeanor. Little did we know that no name would better suit such a vicious and murderous conqueror. I'll later learn that I was not the first of his fellow immortals whose kingdom he had raised. Neither would I be the last as he laid waste to nation after nation, his goal to prove his supremacy and unite the world under his banner so that he may elect himself as their god. As he stormed the palace grounds and executed everybody I held dear, I braced for the end, for his blade to strike me down. But death would be too merciful. With me alone left standing, the last known survivor of my kingdom, he merely sneered, before ordering his troops home. It was never about killing me, it was about asserting his dominance, about taking everything I had, and leaving me alive to witness his ascent, and to suffer the grief of my loss. In the wake of my greatest failure, with no purpose left, I embarked on a nomadic life, venturing from place to place, my identity changing as often as the wind, never staying long enough in one place to risk exposing anybody and giving away my true identity. This continued for many long years until one fateful day I was visiting a small town on the coast to the south, and within a bustling tavern our eyes locked. I'm gonna get some yum water, cause like oh, good shit. Needy bedtime. Let's like get through this clusterfuck of lore and then we'll leave off. Because like I want to get through this as fast as possible. I recognized Artemis immediately and I. Given our time in opposition, neither he nor I knew quite what to expect. I vividly remember how he shot up from his stool before wielding it like some kind of makeshift weapon. I merely took a seat next door and ordered us both a drink. We once were enemies, but long before that, we two were great friends. And to my surprise, despite the thousands of years that had passed, There were only more things we now shared in common. Among them, our loss, for he too lost everything he had held dear to the very same hand. Artemis had believed that the strength of his kingdom's allies, not necessarily their character, would be the key to ensuring the well-being and longevity of his people, but it was his allies that Hades had turned on first. Their purpose served and their usefulness outlived. It was this mutual grief that initially bridged the distance between us, and from that point forward, little could stop us as our tremendous connection reminded us exactly why we had been such close friends all those years before. And when our time in that settlement was over, we set off together. We had not discussed any plans to travel together, nor had we needed to. We had foolishly allowed ourselves to be separated the once, and it was a mistake we vowed to never repeat. As immortals, we had avoided the fleeting companionship of our more transient kin, becoming content in our solitude and numb to our loneliness. We had become all too familiar with loss, our closest friends growing old and withering away in what seemed like a heartbeat. Both Artemis, for the first time in thousands of years, the person I held most dear was as frozen in time as I was. I needed no restraint, and none was shown as we both felt deeply in love. If we had not known better, we would have thought that we had been made for one another. In between our intrepid adventures, we had made a home for ourselves nestled deep within the untouched wilderness. It was like a fairy tale come to life with babbling books and wondrous wildlife. Not to mention the land was perfectly suited to the growing of Artemis's countless medicinal herbs. We would stop in to resupply, crafting an array of medicines and other panaceas capable of treating anything from the common cold to a number of lethal afflictions. Artemis even knew a treatment for exposure symptoms, the first and only such medicine to ever exist. Our supplies replenished, we set out once more, traveling to distant locals, peddling our fares, making quite the name for ourselves as miracle workers along the way. Of course, I could not rightly share the credit. I was little more than a cheerful companion and a helping hand. Having become familiar with our reputation, we would soon cross paths with another immortal kin, Dionysus, or Dion for short, another of Artemis's names, received with similar reluctance to my own, yet comparably adhesive. It was through Dion whom I have learned of Hades' fate. As his conquest was nearing its conclusion, his body began to waste away before his very eyes. His immortality collapsed, and with it, his body simply ceased to regenerate. It was quick, perhaps far quicker than what he had deserved. Nonetheless, neither I nor Artemis were entirely welcoming of this news. After all, if it could happen to Hades, it could just as easily happen to any one of us. And as it would happen, neither Artemis nor Dionysus knew of any surviving immortals besides ourselves. The three of us were all alone in the world, living with bated breath, fearing the day our very own Reaper may yet come knocking. Even though we had anticipated it, nothing could have prepared me for the reality. I had borne witness to countless deaths in my overlong life, from Marston to the friends and colleagues I had made during my rule, but it all paled in comparison to losing the one I had considered my soulmate. We were out on the road, as we almost always were, trekking the long distances between our many destinations when, for the first time, my more physically capable companion began to fall behind. At first, we talked it up to the length of our substantial journey, to a lack of nutrients, inadequate hydration, anything, but as we arrived at our next destination, he could no longer walk unassisted. We remained optimistic, but as his strength continued to diminish, we knew. Reaching out to Dionysus, he arrived in less than a week. Alas, between the three of us, no solution was found. I had lost the man I considered my father, I had lost an entire kingdom, my entire way of life, but even that could not compare to the profound emptiness and unimaginable loss I felt that day, and nothing ever has. I returned to the home we had once shared, but it only conjured up unbearable pain. So I retrieved only the most precious of my belongings and abandoned that place, returning once more to the road. Among those things were a series of Artemis's journals, containing the recipes for many of his most brilliant creations, several important souvenirs, and an oil painting for us both, depicting happier times. I wandered the earth for countless years, lost in my grief as I blindly ventured from place to place, until following my nose to a strikingly familiar locale. The place where it all began. Below my feet, what remained of the very lab from which all intelligent life had bloomed. the valley below as beautiful as it had been nearly 6,000 years later. I made this my new home, built an estate atop the remains of our Genesis, protecting what little remained, and beginning a new life in this breathtaking place. It was not long before a small group of settlers would chance upon this place. Despite some reluctance on my part, they quickly became friends with whom I would join hands to establish the new settlement of Woodcrest in that very same beautiful valley. And nearly a hundred years later, those friends had long since departed. I invited a new friend into that very same estate, a warm fire to dry his rain-drenched fur, and a mug of hot cocoa to soothe his chills. What say you, friend, with my tale now told? Your complex and multifaceted questions now have simple and definitive answers. Come. The same door you found ajar in your slumber is now unlocked. You have slept for long enough. It is about time for you to wake up. I said, wake up. What the hell is that? A dream? No, far too vivid for a dream. Spencer, Apollo. He said something about pheromones, something about painting? I swayed to and fro as I climbed to my feet, supporting my weight against the trunk of the tree to avoid falling flat on my face. My head was racked with agony as it desperately clamored to make sense of what I just experienced, all the while overloaded with such a colossal infusion of new knowledge. Dazed and confused, I stood rooted in place as I recovered my sense of balance and my eyes regained their focus, eventually revealing Apollo's manor and the very door through which I'd entered once before. Would I find it unlocked, warm fire and hot cocoa waiting for me within? Or would I learn that my bizarre dream had been little more than just that? Seeing no reason to delay, I clumsily stumbled forward, closing in on the manor's entrance with each wobbly step. We're gonna leave off here tonight. Shockingly not the longest stream. But that's just like, yeah, honestly, I still feel bad about that. I still feel bad about banning them, but honestly, it's like Ion Agenda said. Or I don't think he did say it. Let me check. Yeah, he didn't say it, but like, honestly, I think it was kind of for the best. Honestly, not gonna lie, with it, like, it had happened in the past when I was doing, like, distant travels, when I was reading that one. They would come in and, like, random people would come in and say some awful thing and then leave. Oh my god. I want to go back to simpler times. I want to go back to Ty making us pancakes. Or you getting mad at Diego and threatening to take away his breakfast burgers. I want to go back to that. But we can never go back. Actually, let me check something on the itch.io real quick. Oh, fuck. I'm like reading the update. I think I might update it and try and get everything working. Okay. Okay, I'm like on the official itch.io page of Sileo. And the formate and okay, I'm just going to like read it to you like word for word. The 4 main routes are as follows. Diego's route completed. Ty's route in development. Lucas's route not yet started. Axel and Dom's route not yet started. Well, that was an absolute clusterfuck. We thought day 14 was bad. We thought day 14 was bad. Anyways, I'm gonna leave off here. Should I live stream making a TikTok so we can like calm the fuck down while laughing about something? Okay, I'm gonna like hop off and then immediately like jump right back on once I get everything set up. So yeah, stay safe, have a good night, and I'll see y'all tomorrow or later depending on what you're doing.